Is it on?
Now.
Hi. Hey, welcome everyone to digging deeper here this morning. I forgot to put the banner up. We won't do that now.
I can do that.
No.
You want to show that somebody floundering
Yeah, I
around
know,
online?
Who is that man behind you? The title of our lesson this morning is
Just stand up behind you.
Waiting for the Promise, and it's found in Genesis chapter 15, you guys. So that's where we're going to be. And it says here, this little statement that says under our lesson, it says, God established his covenant relationship through Abram and his offspring. And so far, we've been through the book of Genesis from, beginning up to this point. And a lot of time has gone by in Earth history. And so we're getting up to the point here where last week we talked about Abram. See, I bet that's him. Hang on a second.
So we're going to record you talking to Mark online. Okay?
Yeah. All right.
He's going to say we didn't put the banner up.
Maybe I'll let it slide.
Please let us go. So the time has gone by, and so now we are up to the point in the book of Genesis where Abram now has moved, and he is living out here in the wilderness where he is located. And God is starting to give Abram some of his promises. He's going to tell Abram today a little bit of the future. He's going to tell him what's going to happen to him and his offspring. He is going to be what? The father of what is now known as the nation of Israel, isn't he? Now, we all know probably this story and how it turns out. And I guess the lesson here is like, we need to listen to God and follow his directions and words no matter what, because the problem that Abram is going to have here, and I think it happens to me all the time, is that, God, that's not really logical or reasonable. I'll take care of it. And do we not do that? And so let's take a look at what he says in here. 15, and the first part is, where is it? Abram's explore the text, which is verse 1. Explore the text on page 83 here. After these events, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. And he says, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great. Well, that's the kind of vision you like to hear. First of all, God said, hey, you're going to have a great reward. Things are going to be good. Things are going to be excellent for you. I am your shield. That's a wonderful thing that you want to have. And it says, how did the Lord come to him? It says in a vision. Now, I don't know what that means exactly. And we've talked about this before. How does God come to us? Has he ever spoken to you? Have you heard words? I have not. But I don't think that's an issue, do you? I think he comes to us in various ways that maybe only you know that he is speaking to you. Maybe that's his communication avenue with you. Perhaps, I don't know if it could be a dream or not. I'm not sure about that. But sometimes things that happen around you give you an indication that, I've been thinking about this back and forth and talking to God and praying about it. And here is something that's happening around me that seems to answer that prayer or give me an indication that God is sending me information. It could be that way. I believe personally that happens to me. I believe that's how a lot of my information is received from God. Here, he gets a vision. I don't know. What's he doing? Is he just sitting around and a vision comes to him? Is it a dream vision? Don't know. It doesn't matter though, does it? Doesn't matter. And God gives him this information. I was wondering, why did he have to tell him that I'm your shield, your reward will be great? Well, Abram's human too. He's just a man. And so we need to have God, I guess, reinforce us sometimes to say, you're doing what I want you to do. Keep up this direction, keep up this work. And here's just a kudos, an attaboy, so to speak. And we all enjoy that. We all need that kind of stuff. No matter what we do, we like that stuff. And when it comes from God, it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal. So verses 2 and 3, but Abram said, Lord God, what can you give me since I am childless and the heir of my house is, how do you pronounce that, Steve? Eliezer of Damascus. Abram continued, look, does he say this? Look, you have given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house will be my heir. Human logic here. I mean, I can't blame him for thinking he hasn't let God really fulfill his promise yet. God just said, don't be afraid. I'm going to make you a great nation, and so on and so forth, and I'm going to bless you. And so here's our human logic jumping in, right? I mean, I would too. It's like, okay, that is good news. You're going to bless me, and I'm going to become like the father of this great nation. I don't have any kids, and look how old we're getting. So we immediately put the limitations right there, don't we? We put the logic, human logic, humanism as I call it, where we bring God down to our level and try to understand and comprehend him on a human level. And there's your first mistake, isn't it? That's our first mistake. As soon as we think of God as like, well, there's no way I can have any offspring. We're past that age. How are we going to pull this off? That's where we make the mistake. So, and Abram is kind of limited on who he's thinking about here, who his heir is going to be, and he's got he's got his slaves, his helpers around the place, and in the back of his mind, and he says this a little bit later, then he's kind of going to blame his wife too, right? It's like, she's past childbearing age. You know that, don't you, God? He brings that up. So God's promise in verse 4. Now the word of the Lord came to him. This one will not be your heir. Instead, one who comes from your own body will be your heir. More confusion for him right here. Just like I said, now he's telling Abram, no. It's going to be a biological offspring. It's going to be, you're going to produce another child. So, when this happens today, it is kind of a big deal when it seems like when couples seem like they're having difficulty having children, and you hear these stories all the time, and they end up adopting, and then before you know it, then they have one. And this is we call this a miracle. Well, that's not anywhere near what God's talking about here. This is even way past that. So I like verse 5 here. He took him outside and said, see, this is what I like. Right? He took him outside. What does that mean?
Well, they were in the tent talking before, so now they're going outside into the.
But it says he took him out. I'm saying God took him outside.
Yeah.
Is that what it says?
Well, I think it's still part of the vision, and I think it was probably a dream. He's asleep, or he's there, and he wakes up, and God's talking to him. And so just to affirm what he's saying, it's like, come here, let me show you something.
I know, but I find that fascinating.
Go outside, and out there in the desert region, I think they were in the Negev. So
yeah.
It's all desert. There's nothing there. So there's no lights. There's no anything. And so there's got to be millions of stars that you could see, which is kind of what he says.
Right.
If you can count them, which is it's like, all right, here, check this out. Nothing's too hard for me. Mm-hmm. And so this is how many you're going to have if you can indeed envision this.
Right.
You can figure out what I'm actually talking about. But the neat thing, I think, too, is, and I don't know what we're going to study in the next couple of weeks, probably one of them will be about Isaac.
Yes, of course.
But Abraham's hesitant. It's like he's doing the analytical thing. It's
Right.
like, God, I just don't know how you're going to do this. And God says, yeah, I'll take care of it. I'm going to do it this way. And even later, when he comes and talks to Abram and Sarah, and they go, this is what's going to happen, and they still doubt it.
Yeah.
Even so far as to go outside of, well, God, yeah, you said that, but I'm going to go over here because I got this avenue I can take. But by the time he ends up with Isaac and he goes up on the mountain, there wasn't ever any doubt. He just did. And Isaac went with him, and there was never any doubt what God was going to do. He had so much faith by that time that, okay, I'm not sure how God's going to pull it off, but he's pulled it off so far. And so whatever I do, if I have to sacrifice my son, he's going to do something to make this all right. And so perhaps it's just sowing a few seeds here that says, look, I told you this was what's going to happen. Yeah, but how are you going to do it?
Yep.
Well, this is what's going to happen. Yeah, but let me help you out on that just in case. To finally he gets to the point of, yeah, you said this was going to happen. Whatever you say, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Well, I want to point out something from the very beginning, because, if God ever said to me, I'm going to be your shield and your reward's going to be very great, to me, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get $1 million, or I'm going to be money. Right. Now, back then, you were rich if you had a lot of kids. And then also kids would have, would help you in your herding, and you have slaves, and it'd be a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So that's how we were considered rich, is by your downline too, of all your kids. Now, see, to me, I wouldn't be relating to that. I would be thinking, heck, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be going all over the world, and by me, it's all about me. But that's not what it was. I mean, he was saying you're going to, later he says you're going to be the father of many nations. But if God was coming to me in a dream, I'd be going, oh, you're going to make my reward great. Really? Mm-hmm. That's going to be awesome.
Well, he already was rich in the world's eyes in terms of possessions, because he had so much that he and Lot had to split. And this was in one of the prior chapters. We didn't actually study that in here, but he had so much that they had to split.
With Lot. I understand
so that they could go. And so he had all this stuff, even though personally he didn't have any kids. Mm-hmm. And so
that's what I'm just talking about the mentality of when we read this.
Yeah.
If someone's a non-believer who starting to read God's word, that's what they would pick up on, right? I mean, that's what I would immediately pick up on, that I'm going to be rich and it's going to be all about me. And so that's what was so amazing is here he says, later, you're going to have so many, of great nations that you can't even count the pieces of sand on all the beaches of the world. I mean, that just blows your mind away when you start thinking of that. So that was the first thing I would be going, oh, wait, we're talking about people?
Yeah.
Kids? What? And, now we only say, at least for me, I'm like, God, I only want 2 kids. Please, no more. You see what you see? And it's kind of backwards to me.
Well, back then they were still following his directive of fill the earth and subdue it.
I'm just pointing that out as a marker to because
well, he already had all the earthly possessions. So like you said, the one thing he didn't have was the children and the heirs. And so God said, hey, this is your great reward. You will have
God
all of
building
this.
his faith because he was wealthy. So, okay, I'm wealthy. That came, I got that.
Yeah.
And then God says, leave.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, okay, I'll listen to you, God. And then it's like, well, then I'm going to make you richer. And it's like God says, this is what I'm going to do. It's like, okay, now we're kind of stepping out. I think Marty, Randy pointed out that
it's not biologically possible here at this point.
And then he's giving a little bit because God's plan has to be followed. Here's a guy who was wealthy and he's stepping out on faith. But how far will the person step out unless their faith grew? And God just kept telling him this and until he got to the point where he was willing to sacrifice his son. So that's a whole leap of faith from someone who's rich who doesn't have to listen to anybody.
True.
To someone who says, take a knife, stab your son.
Yeah.
I just see him building faith to serve the purpose of God's plan.
Yeah.
What I keep reading into this.
And do you think that he became impatient?
I want to think so.
Because that's why I was thinking that's why he went with Hagar.
Yeah,
I mean,
because,
he was impatient.
Well,
Yeah.
how many years did he wait? You said?
Yeah, well,
Didn't he
I
wait
think it was only
25
like
years?
It was
no,
just,
no,
no, that was
no,
a
it was
year
only a
because
year.
God
It was only a
said,
year.
this time next year, you'll have a
Oh,
son.
Yeah,
But
Right.
before that time,
Both of them.
well, he was 75 when he first got the vision,
Right.
and he was 99
Right.
when
So-
Isaac was born. So that's like
like
a
almost a
24-year
Long time
period
Right.
there that he'd
before he
been
actually had a
doing
son.
this, that he'd been
Impossible at that
following.
age, but then God showed him.
Yeah, it was a
Right.
year later when they
Nothing
came
is
back.
impossible.
Mhm.
So a year later from the promise, when he was told that he would have an offspring from his own body.
Well, but I think Ishmael was like 13 years older than Isaac, if I remember.
That is true.
So
He
Abraham
came
got tired of waiting and took matters in his own
Right, we
hands.
don't know, at this point right here,
Yes,
we don't know how old he is. It's somewhere in the middle of all of that. It's at least 13 or 14 years before Isaac was born, but it could be anywhere in that time frame.
And you know, just to read the scripture, he says, and when he took him outside, he said, "Look at the sky and count the stars, and, and if you're able to count them, see if you are able to count them." Then he said to him, "Your offspring will be that numerous." So yeah, again, he's telling
Well,
Abram.
says 10 years. It says Abraham did not doubt God's promise or power to fulfill his covenant with him, though 10 years had passed without that. And it was referring to Elijah, or not Elijah, the servant.
Elijah, yeah.
I know I'm mispronouncing, born in Abraham's house, suggesting to the Lord that he was permitted to adopt the servant as his heir. So,
see his human nature. His
Right.
human nature is kicking in. here.
right, that's right. That's what I would.
Yeah, our human logic is
Right.
kicking in, saying, "Yeah, okay, yeah, we're going to raise this nation. Let's see, who have I got?
Right.
Oh, there's just a couple of kids
Yeah.
here, and they're not mine." That's probably what God is talking about. That's probably in His mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they hadn't written Leviticus yet, but if you look in Leviticus, that is one of the things that he says, you know, that here's how the firstborn gets this,
Right.
but if you
Right.
don't have, you know, a male, a son,
Yeah.
then the daughter,
Right.
you don't have any kids, then it goes to
The servant.
to a servant.
Right.
And so eventually they get there.
Right,
And,
but-
and I don't know how he arrived at that. I think you're right, though. I think he was impatient, like we would be. I mean, we want things now. So God tells us, you're going to get this. All right, great.
Yeah.
Where
You're
is it?
thinking like
You know?
by this
It's
afternoon.
been
Well,
10
you know-
minutes. What's the deal?
And you know, bless Abram's heart here just for a second, because he's got the message from Almighty God, who gives him the acknowledgement and the blessing, and here's your instructions. Well, you know, if I'm Abram, I'm going, wow, God has just told me this terrific information and this news, and He has blessed me. I'm going to get to work right now, because I'm going to do God's bidding right now. I want to get this show on the road because I want God to be pleased with my work here. Can you blame him? I can't.
See, and the reality to me is it wasn't like that. To me, when I feel like it takes a while for me to, what do you call think it over, pray it over. Was that really from God? You know, like, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
a week going, maybe, okay, yeah, okay, it was from God, but how am I going to do it? You know, I don't know. It's just,
You think if you pray long enough, God will say it your way.
maybe. I mean, that's probably what
That's
it
what
is.
I think.
You know,
That's true.
That's right.
It's so true.
I
You know,
think
you're like, oh, look.
That was grilling.
Well, the neat thing about it, God didn't fuss at him, gripe at him or anything. He just went about reaffirming, this is what I've already told you. He didn't say anything bad to him at all, as far as I can tell, and
Yeah.
which is encouraging to us because we hear that same voice and yet we don't always act on it, or we analyze it too much, or
Right.
we do just like what he did.
No, we missed the whole
And
blessing.
God's saying, you're human. That's okay. I'm still going to do it. I would prefer to do it with you understanding that I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Well, I think God's
And-
very patient.
Oh, yeah.
And, so, yeah, no, he is.
A whole lot more patience than I have.
But he knows, okay, how you described Abram back, he was a rich man way before all this happened. He was, and how do you, I want to get a lesson on, leadership and that sort of thing, but how did he get that way? Evidently, he was a man that got things done. And that's how he became so successful and so wealthy. I'm sure he was blessed, but
Absolutely.
still, it takes motivation to get this stuff going. And here you've got a man that's just been told by Almighty God, like, here's the plan. Well, Abram's probably a man that runs with the plan. He probably says, okay, let's go.
But you have to be really careful when you say that, because that's kind of like to me, it's almost taking God's glory from the process. I mean, it's a blessing that God did that. It doesn't matter how much it does matter how much he worked and he was obedient, but you have to be really careful that, what is it that we have a minister, he's always saying, it's not prophecy, but prophet. If you go out there and work, God's going to bless you and all of that. And that's not necessarily true. Like, my husband is very smart, but he got that from God.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I don't want to say where you're so self-sustained you can do anything. So I always think, that's God's blessing. God did that. You better make sure that you put, that stamp on God did that.
Mm-hmm.
Because right when you don't do that, God will take everything from you. That's just for me, from my experience. I'm always going, oh, no. God's been blessing us. You better make sure you know who to thank for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because right when you do that, he'll take everything from you. Let's see how good you do on this one. And then you're really dependent on God. So I don't know. I think it's totally different, I think, from back in that time, because they didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have all the luxuries of life. I can't even imagine living like that. Intense and dirty and not washing my hair. You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. I mean, that sounds so bad.
I know, but that's the norm.
I know. And that's what I think. When they think that children is a blessing and all that, I mean, now we're like, really? We don't want any more kids. I mean, do you see how it's totally warped the way I think, I should say?
Well, I think now everything's changed so much.
Right.
If Randy came into my office telling me that he'd been talking to God, next thing I'd be hunting as a psychiatrist for him. And you'd probably get locked up somewhere. Because we hear all these guys, the gurus and all of that, and they're saying things that probably make a little sense, but we think they're crazy,
Yeah.
and they may not be. I don't know.
And what has messed that whole thing up is so many false prophets that have claimed conversations, and has made it rough for everyone else that probably has had honest communication.
Oh, yeah.
Authentic.
Yeah, we never know who was the one that had the communication.
Abram's faith, verse 6. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness.
You reckoned it.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
You
You reckoned it. That's a country word. But anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Now that's I don't know if that had to be said or not. I guess you have to say that, but I do believe Abram believed God. I do believe he believed God. I just think he was thinking. I'm trying to think for Abram here. I just thinking he's thinking, this is a terrific plan. I'm blessed. I'm honored. This is, he's chosen me. And so I'm just going to take this ball and run with it, and I'm going to make this happen. Hard-nosed kind of thing.
I think his first thing is, why me, Lord?
Probably.
Why have you selected me to do this?
Yeah, probably so. In verse 7, he says, he also said to him, God talking to Abram, I am Yahweh. Or maybe Yahweh. I am Yahweh who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. What is God kind of reaffirming here? Trying to reaffirm his position? So, I don't think he has to remind Abram who he is, but I believe God is just making mention the fact, like, okay, keep in mind, I am the Almighty here, and I am in charge. Maybe it's to give him some reinforcement, to give him some courage or confidence. I'm not really sure.
Well, he's introducing a new name. He hasn't ever been Yahweh up to this point.
Well,
and so
yeah.
He's just saying, this is who I am. I'm the God who always is. I have always been here. I'm the one that's in charge of all of this stuff. I did this, and I've got all this other stuff for you, and I will do it. If you believe that I did it to start with, which he does because he's there, he's taken him that far, then he just gives him a new name, or gives himself a new name to say, this is who I am.
Yeah. And that is significant because isn't it true in some writings, Jewish writings, or they're not allowed to either write it or say it? Not allowed to say it.
I believe they weren't allowed to say it, speak it.
So it's that I know I've heard that too. I don't really know for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah. It was so holy that you.
Oh no, that's just the way the Jewish people considered that to be the reverent name, the holiest name that they could call him, and so it was so holy, and they were not holy enough to be able to utter that word.
And let's see, that was verse 7. And our lesson text jumps all the way to 13. Verse 13. Then the Lord said to Abram, know this for certain. Your offspring will be foreigners in a land that does not belong to them. Well, okay.
Yeah.
They will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. Now, what's he referencing here?
Yeah.
Egypt.
Pharaoh.
They're going to be enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. And this may be well, this is the way I guess I looked at that. He promised Abram, I'm going to build a nation on you, on your offspring. And he kind of does it. I mean, it starts, but then what do? They kind of migrate, don't they, into Egyptian territory and eventually become part of the Egyptian kingdom and enslavement.
They have to be because of the famine.
The drought. Yeah, they had really no choice.
They really didn't have a choice, but at the time they had to go there to get the food to survive.
Right.
But then they kept them for 400 years. I always wondered why then, if this knowledge of what God told Abraham was here and they knew that, would they be counting down the days? And it's like, okay, it's not going to happen in my generation, but somewhere down here, okay, we're down to 390 days. We got 10 years of this oppression left, and then we're out of here.
Yeah,
and he even tells them they're going to, not only will they be released, but he even predicts that they will plunder the Egyptians basically and take everything. And Abraham doesn't have to worry about that because, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Well, but I'm kind of like you in this fact. It's like, he said, you'll be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. I would say, okay, now when will this start? And will I still be around to see it? What role will I have in this enslavement? And the offspring are going to be counting down the days. They would be, wouldn't you? It's like 400 years. When did it start? We've been living here in Egypt. I've been raised here as a kid. Here I am. I'm 60-something years old, and
so you wouldn't know where to go if you left Egypt.
That's right.
Like those refugees that overseas now.
Yeah.
Just go wherever they can survive. But I think that's what they did. When they came out of the world.
Well, they had to get. You had Abraham, then you had Isaac, and then you had Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob, Joseph from there. So it was 3 generations later before they even became enslaved.
Right.
In Egypt.
So we don't know how big
but they didn't live that long anyway.
But then it said, the 4th generation you'll be out. And so Joseph had died, but then his sons were the ones that were part of the, they took Joseph's bones with them and
Right.
buried them in Canaan. And so it was the four, and God says the fourth generation will be set free. So it was about, which he says 400 years. So I don't know. They didn't all live to be 100 years old, but somewhere in the 80 to 100 year time frame. But it really wasn't that far, that many generations passed down. If they actually all knew this, did the fourth generation just forget, or did they never know, or how?
That's possible.
It's,
Because
as you got farther and farther away from it, you just don't pass that information along, and so they don't know.
And at the same time, during the Exodus, did they not complain? It's like, oh, come on, let's go back. Let's just go back, because that's all they knew. That's all they knew was
that generation had been 2 generations, 3 generations didn't know anything but Egyptian captivity.
So everything becomes relative, as to what you get used to, I guess. So I look at this 400 years of captivity, if you will, to the growing and development strictly of numbers of people. The nation is growing internally to Egypt here. And Egypt says, well, they're handy dandy. Let's use them. And there's a bunch of them. And so they did utilize them in all those centuries that they kept them. And so, your offspring will be foreigners in a land that doesn't belong to them. So Abraham's probably thinking, so we're going to leave this promised land that you said we have here. We're going to leave this. He's probably not really, he doesn't know that they're going to have to be forced to leave due to what? Food and famine, things like that. And if anything, this is just me thinking about the history of the Hebrew people. They are kind of nomads, and they're I think a hardy people, because they can take generations, this many people, and move. Like they go to Egypt, and then they end up settling, of course. But then when they move out during the Exodus, there are people that just seems like, man, let's just go. Let's get our stuff and we can go. And you couldn't, that would be like, what? It'd probably be like an entire state in the United States right now. Everybody in the state of Arkansas picking up and moving out. Could we do that?
Well, I guess they didn't have border checks back then.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing though. When we would leave Florida for hurricanes, what a mess.
Oh yeah.
What a mess.
It took us like 10 hours one day to get out of Florida.
They turn all the freeways around too, all going the same direction out.
Mhm.
Yeah, that'll freak you out.
And so I don't know how they managed all this, but anyway, that's kind of like down the road here. We haven't even gotten into Egypt yet, but in verses 14 through 16, it says, however, I will judge the nation they serve. Oh boy, and afterward they will go out with many possessions. So they're going to be taking the nation of Israel with them and whatever they bring along with them. And it says, but you will go to your fathers in peace and be buried in a ripe old age. In the 4th generation, they will return here. He's talking about where he is right now. For the iniquity of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. What's going on with that? Is that like another plan right there?
Well, he's not. God is patient, and he doesn't want anyone to perish. He would still, even the Amorites, who were wicked, raider type people.
Yep.
He still used them for certain reasons, and then they eventually got taken over by the Babylonians, but not at this time.
You're right.
I've always it said back last week, we talked about when he told Abraham to go to this particular place, and he got there, and they went in stages, and he got to the Negev, and it said, and the Canaanites were already in the land.
Right.
And you're going, okay, well, why? Why didn't you get rid of all of them? They were all descendants of Ham.
Right.
And Ham made the mistake there with his dad. And so they cursed him. It's like, why didn't you just go ahead and wipe out Ham and get rid of all the Canaanites? And then they wouldn't have all this problem when they got out of Egypt to go to the place, but it was to prepare the land so that they would actually have a place that they didn't have to do anything to, but just walk in and inhabit it. It was already cultivated. It was already, everything was, houses were built. They had everything they needed when they got there. So even that, God uses even people that we don't particularly think, you know, why did you use that person? Why did you use that type of people to do that? But God always has that plan in place. It talks about this fourth generation will return here. That fourth generation is the one that, they left, but they're the one that grumbled so much that they didn't even get in to see the promise.
That's right.
They didn't actually get there. They wandered around for 40 years and died.
Yep.
And so the next generation is the one that actually made it in there. And so he doesn't tell him that.
Yeah.
But he's just telling them this is what's going to happen.
What I keep backing up to, because I am overwhelmed how awesome God is that God is still, we got to remember that God is not confined to time. So we talk about he's so patient. Well, he is, but I mean, he's not waiting for generations. He already, you know what I mean? That's why I feel like he's the bookshelf, and we're the, have the books. So I think God already knows exactly what's going to happen, just like we already know that it's going to happen with the end of the book. I mean, God in Revelation, he already knows, but he's allowing it to happen through our life to draw us close to him, every one of us. I just am amazed that God is not part of time, because I keep thinking, 4 generations. So how many is that? Is that 400 years? So, that just.
Yeah.
Patience without time doesn't seem to.
Right.
It's, I mean,
right.
if he has no time, then patience is irrelevant.
Right.
Right. So I just think God already knows it. To us, we have to go through that journey. It's about us learning. God already knows what's going to happen. But we say hindsight's 20/20, but like right now, the prophecy that has been given us in the book of Revelation, why aren't we being prepared right now? We know it's going to happen. Jesus is going to come back. Why aren't we prepared? Do you see what I'm saying? We should all be in God's word. We should be running to our neighbors right now, immediately, right now, and telling people about Christ. Why aren't we doing that? Do you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing back then.
But at the same time, let me. Yeah, I'm not. I just said that when God gave Abram this information and his vision and this mission, he jumped all over it and went real fast and messed it up. And so maybe I can relate that to what you're saying as well.
Well, that's right. But see,
you want to take the ball and run fast.
Right now, let's go. Right now, everybody put your hand in. All right, let's go. Count of 3. Let's go. Everybody tell you about. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing to me. That's what we try to learn. Is, of course, we don't know. When John, physically wrote it down what God said, he, it's different from the timeline that Abram, because Abram was told 4 generations. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? In the book of Revelation, we don't know if it's 2,000 years,
right?
5,000 years. Yeah. We don't know that. So. I don't know.
And you're just trying to make it happen.
I know it's going to happen. I am so.
You make an interesting point, but what I thought of when you said that was, and I think of children today who think they're going to live forever.
Yeah.
And don't do anything. I think the human nature certainly complicates our ability to really listen to and follow Christ and prepare for what will come. Right. And he made us that way, so it's got to be, his plan is to mold us.
Right. It's the journey. So hard and difficult.
That's why we don't seem to jump ahead, because we're not there with him.
I just am so fearful to get before the Lord and him go, what happened? I told you. Hello. And you just did nothing.
Like a thief in the night, right?
Yeah. So now I'm hoping that if the whole context of this lesson, maybe the theme of this lesson is faith. Do everyone agree with that?
Sure.
And here I'm at the end of the lesson, but I believe the bottom line is still the faith of Abram, and that's what's the key point of this entire lesson, is the faith has to increase, the faith has to continue, because we get confused in our human minds when God gives us direction. And even if we know the direction, we know the plan, we know the plan of salvation, we know the end of the game here, we know the end of the story
Right.
through the book of Revelation. But yet we confuse it, we clutter it, and our faith wavers sometimes.
We make
And-
it about us, and it's not
Exactly,
about us.
exactly.
None of it's about us. It's about
Can I
God.
ask a question? When we go through the Bible and we study, it's historical. Okay, it started off with a very small percentage of humankind, and today maybe it's where I associate. I see more people, or I'm around more people that talk about Christ, but yet Pastor Rick was saying it's a dark world out there, which I see also.
Right.
I keep thinking in God's plan, we started off with what kind of religion? You know, start off with the Jews, then Christianity came, and then Christianity is going, pow, like that. So it's really grown. Now it's splintered off, and not everybody believes exactly the same or doesn't follow the same precepts of this church or that church. But the core of so many Christian religions is the same. And I see this explosion, exponential explosion of Christianity in the world, which has got to be what Christ wanted to see, because how else would he get the Gentiles involved in it? But the darkness, that scares the ever-loving out of me, because
Yeah.
there are people who are turning and going so much in the opposite direction today. That's why there won't be anything about a tragedy that hurts Christians, but it'll be about
Right.
something politically
Some
correct today. That,
Muslims.
yeah.
Right.
So anyway, that's just
Yeah.
a fleeting thought.
Yeah. Anybody else have any comments before we disengage here? Because as a substitute teacher, I can always cut the class early. It's my
You're
privilege.
the director.
That's right.
Whenever you're ready.
That's right.
You ever let your kids out?
All the time.